Good morning. Welcome to Long Live Third Parties Podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., a third parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andy Bouchard. Today I read the case Coalition for Free and Open Elections versus McElderry 48F 3D 493, Court of Appeals, 10th Circuit, 1995. Friends, we're going to talk about ballot access today. So for those of you who are passionate about ballot access, listen up. This case involved the aforementioned group, Coalition for Free and Open Elections, as well as a number of third parties. The first one they list is the Prohibition Party. I wonder why they list that first. Was it arbitrary or was there some other reason? They also have the Socialist Party. They also have, let me look here, the New Alliance Party. And these people get together to fight access laws. I like to see that type of coalition building. Props to you all. This was in Oklahoma. And in this case, these individuals, these parties, did not like the ballot access laws in Oklahoma as they pertain to write-in votes. As the decision says, quote, the coalition, several minor political parties, their presidential and vice president candidates, and individuals who wanted to vote for them, challenged Oklahoma's election laws to the extent that such laws statutorily ban write-in voting in presidential and vice presidential elections. Specifically, appellants raised a First and 14th Amendment challenge to Oklahoma statute Title 26, number 7.127, number 1, which provides, if the name of any person is written on a ballot, said name shall not be counted. Appellants do not argue that every ban on write-in voting is unconstitutional. Instead, they argue that Oklahoma's ban as applied to presidential and vice presidential elections is unconstitutional when considered in conjunction with Oklahoma's other ballot access laws, end quote. I'd like to see them invoking the First Amendment. We here at Free Press Media Press have a mission to advance the First Amendment. We love third parties and we love the First Amendment, so when the two combine, it raises the awesomeness to a higher level. We also did another podcast about obscenity trials. So we applaud that. Obscenity trials are different than ballot access trials, but we like to see the First Amendment advanced, wherever it may be. In this case, the justices consider the nature of Oklahoma's ballot access laws. As they say, quote, Oklahoma's ballot access laws provide 4 alternatives to write-in voting for presidential electors to gain access to a general election ballot, end quote. So they list a number of ways you can get on the ballot. Oklahoma doesn't like write-in. Do you like write-ins? Have you ever written someone in for a third party or an independent? I wrote myself in once. At that time, I didn't feel moved to vote for any of the other candidates, even the third parties ones, so I wrote myself in. The other elections, I did vote for third parties. What about you? Ultimately, they conclude that the ballot access laws are fine in Oklahoma, according to them at least, not according to our friends. They also say it's okay for Oklahoma to ban write-in voting. They argue, I've never thought about this before, so the issue of whether write-in voting is valid or not, as they say, Oklahoma's challenge ban on write-in voting is presumptively valid, end quote, is something food for thought. I wonder if it could ever hurt third parties to have write-in voting. It doesn't seem to be the case, but maybe it could. Certainly worth considering the nature of write-in voting. As they say, quote, Oklahoma asserted this presumption and articulated a number of state interests furthered by its ban on write-in voting. These interests include discouraging unrestrained factionalism in the general election, limiting the general election to recognized parties and to those parties and candidates that are well supported, as evidenced by their ability to meet the signature requirements, focusing the voters on major issues and candidates and conserving state resources by reducing the risk that resources will be used to count votes for fictitious candidates or those unwilling or unqualified to serve in public office. End quote. Do you think any of those reasons are valid? Some of these we may have to consider. From what I have gathered, listening to third parties don't like ballot access, so we're probably inclined to oppose any notion of ballot access. Do we support any of these reasons? Are any of them good? They also say it's important for Oklahoma to have these ballot access rules because it helps in publicity for elections. What do you think about that? I never heard that before, so maybe that issue will come up in more of these ballot access trials. We'll see. This court also claims ballot access is a futile move because, especially for the president office, it's hard to make a write-in candidate win. So therefore, it's not helpful to have these write-in options, according to this court. They also talk about how it costs money for the machines to count write-in votes. I wouldn't think it costs that much money, but it says here about $1 million it supposedly costs them. It sounds extreme, and you would think with the technology we have today that it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it is. This was back in 95, and I don't know how much technology has changed to make this a different situation, but according to them back then, it was a costly endeavor to count the votes. And they also talk about some people use write-ins as a way to make a statement about the elections rather than to have a candidate support it. And they say there's other ways they can do that. So ultimately they conclude the following. They say, quote, thus having determined that Oklahoma's ballot access laws do not impermissibly burden voters' constitutional rights and that Burdic's presumption of validity therefore attaches to Oklahoma's ban on write-in voting, we conclude that the appellant's interests are not enough to overcome that presumption. Accordingly, we affirm that the district court's grant of summary judgment to appellees. End quote. Our friends lost this one. We lost. But we can win. We've got to keep learning more about these laws. We got to keep fighting. That's why I'm doing this podcast and having this emphasis so we can learn more about what third parties need. I want to learn more about these cases so we can get better in what we do in the courts. You and I may be in the courts someday. We might have to draft legal briefs. And in studying these cases, it helps us to see what we can do to improve and win one day. Long live third parties. Goodbye.